He invited his poor ex-wife to his Christmas party to disgrace her, but she arrived in Limousine plus Triplets. Sometimes life has a funny way of coming full circle. Sometimes the person who shatters your world becomes the very reason you discover just how unbreakable you really are. Her name was Charlotte Williams Thornfield, and this is the story of how she went from being the woman who gave everything to a man who gave her nothing, to becoming the woman who walked into his Christmas party with triplets and designer coats and diamonds on her fingers. Hello, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Winnie Tales. Before we dive into Charlotte's incredible story, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that like button, you are helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, please tell us the city or country where you are watching from, because together, we are not just sharing stories, we are keeping hope alive. But let's start from the beginning, because every ending needs its proper beginning. Charlotte was 24 when she married Jake Thornfield. 24 and so full of hope it practically sparkled like Christmas lights in December. She believed in the fairy tale, you know. She believed that love conquered all, that a good woman could inspire a man to be better. That marriage was this sacred bond where two people built something beautiful together. Jake was handsome in that effortless, old-money way that made other women envious and made Charlotte's mother cautiously optimistic. 6'1", sandy blonde hair, blue eyes that could charm venture capitalists and seduce anyone in his path. When he proposed to her on Christmas Eve outside his family's sprawling estate in the Berkshires, with snow falling like something out of a movie, Charlotte thought she was the luckiest woman alive. The first red flag should have been his obsession with Amanda. Not Amanda herself. She was just another woman caught in Jake's web. But the way Jake talked about her, the way her name came up in every conversation. She was just a phase, he'd say whenever Charlotte brought up the fact that they still texted constantly. You're my wife now, Charlotte. You're my future. Charlotte swallowed those words like bitter medicine. She told herself that loving Jake meant accepting all of him, including his past. She told herself that being a good wife meant supporting her husband, even when that support felt like swallowing glass. Even when she saw Amanda's name lighting up his phone at dinner. Even when she heard him making excuses to visit Tyler, Amanda's son from another relationship. The second red flag was how he treated her when they couldn't get pregnant right away. Month after month, Charlotte took those tests, hoping and praying for 2 little lines. Month after month, nothing. And Jake made sure she knew whose fault he thought it was. Amanda never had any trouble, he'd say, scrolling through photos of Tyler on his phone. She gave me proof that the Thornfield genes are strong. So what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Those 4 words became the soundtrack to Charlotte's marriage. What's wrong with you when she forgot to pick up his dry cleaning? What's wrong with you when she asked him to spend less time with Amanda? What's wrong with you when she suggested they both see a fertility specialist? I'm not going to any doctor, he'd snap, his blue eyes going cold. Tyler is living proof that everything works just fine on my end. The problem clearly isn't me. So Charlotte went alone. Month after month, appointment after appointment, test after test. She let them poke her and prod her and examine every inch of her reproductive system. She drank those awful contrast drinks for the imaging. She lay on those cold examination tables while machines hummed around her. She subjected herself to procedures that left her cramping and bleeding and crying in hospital parking lots by herself, because Jake was always too busy to come with her. And you know what? All those tests showed that Charlotte was perfectly, completely, 100% fertile and healthy. Her eggs were excellent. Her tubes were clear. Her hormone levels were textbook perfect. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. But Jake didn't want to hear that. When Charlotte came home with the results, practically vibrating with relief and hope, he barely looked up from his laptop. That's good, babe, he mumbled, eyes fixed on the screen, probably emailing Amanda about some business matter. Jake, this means the issue might be. Ain't no issue with me, he cut her off, finally looking up with eyes that had gone ice cold. I have Tyler. That's all the proof anyone needs. Don't start with this nonsense. The emotional pain was bad enough. Jake had a way with words that could cut deeper than any blade. He never raised his hand to her. He was too smart for that, too concerned about his family's reputation among Boston society. But he found other ways to hurt her. A dismissive look when she tried to contribute to conversations at his mother's dinner parties. A sharp comment about her inability to fulfill her wifely duties in front of his business partners. The way he'd compare her to Amanda, always unfavorably, always in that casual tone that made it sound like he was just stating facts rather than destroying her piece by piece. Amanda would have understood this, he'd say when Charlotte questioned his late-night business meetings. Amanda never made me feel guilty for providing for my family. His family. As if Charlotte wasn't part of it. As if she hadn't given up her own career aspirations to support his real estate empire. As if she didn't spend every waking moment trying to be perfect enough, polished enough, Thornfield enough. But she was never enough. Not for Jake. Not for his ice-cold mother Victoria, who looked at Charlotte like she was a disappointment wrapped in designer clothes. Not for the Boston society matrons who whispered about how sad it was that the Thornfield heir had married someone who couldn't give him children. 7 years. Charlotte gave Jake 7 years of her life. 7 years of trying to be the perfect wife. 7 years of believing that if she just loved him hard enough, sacrificed enough, gave enough, he would finally see her worth. She had no idea that the worst was still to come. That the man she'd pledged forever to was about to take everything she had left and throw her away like she was nothing. Charlotte should have known better than to marry a man who proposed on Christmas Eve. There was something almost calculated about it, the way Jake had orchestrated the entire scene like a perfectly staged production. The snow falling at exactly the right moment. The family gathered inside the Thornfield estate, watching through the frost-etched windows. His grandmother's 3-carat diamond ring, sized perfectly for Charlotte's finger, as if he'd been planning this for months. "Say yes," he'd whispered, his breath forming clouds in the cold December air. "Make me the happiest man alive." And she had. Of course she had. Because at 24, Charlotte Williams still believed that love was enough. That marrying into one of Boston's oldest families meant security, legacy, something permanent in a world that had felt uncertain ever since her father died. The wedding was in June, 6 months later. 200 guests at the Harvard Club. Charlotte's mother, Eleanor, wore pale blue and cried through the entire ceremony. Charlotte had thought they were happy tears. Looking back, she wondered if her mother had somehow known what was coming. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Eleanor had whispered as she adjusted Charlotte's veil. "Just promise me you'll never lose yourself in this marriage." Charlotte had laughed and promised. She had no idea how quickly she would break that promise. The first year wasn't terrible. Jake was attentive enough, at least when his mother was watching. He took Charlotte to charity galas and business dinners, showing her off like she was another acquisition, something beautiful to display alongside his collection of vintage watches and his grandfather's paintings. But there were signs. Small things that Charlotte told herself didn't matter. The way Jake's phone would light up with messages from Amanda at all hours. "She's just a friend," he'd say, not even looking up. "We go way back. High school sweethearts, you know how it is." Charlotte knew how it was. She knew that Amanda had a son named Tyler. She knew that Jake still paid for Tyler's private school tuition, even though he insisted the boy wasn't his. "I'm just helping out an old friend," he'd explain whenever Charlotte asked. That's what decent people do. What Charlotte didn't know was how often Jake saw them. How many business lunches were actually spent with Amanda at her townhouse in Cambridge. How Tyler called Jake Uncle Jake, with a familiarity that suggested far more than an old friend helping out. The second year was when the baby conversation started. Or rather, when it became an interrogation. "Victoria keeps asking when we're going to give her grandchildren," Jake said one morning over coffee, scrolling through his phone as usual. "I told her we're trying." They weren't really. Jake worked late most nights. When he was home, he was tired or distracted or suddenly remembered something urgent he needed to do in his study. Charlotte tried not to think about what it meant that her husband could barely find time to touch her. By year 3, the questions became accusations. "Are you doing something wrong?" Jake asked after Charlotte's period arrived for the 36th consecutive month. "Because Amanda got pregnant easily enough. Maybe you should see someone." So Charlotte saw someone. And then someone else. And then a whole team of specialists at Mass General who put her through every test imaginable. Blood work. Ultrasounds. hormone panels, procedures with names she could barely pronounce that left her cramping on the bathroom floor, while Jake was God knows where doing God knows what. Every test came back the same. Charlotte was perfectly healthy. Textbook fertile, one doctor had said. There's absolutely no reason you shouldn't be able to conceive. When Charlotte brought the results home, her hands shaking with relief and something that felt almost like vindication, Jake barely glanced at the paperwork. Great, he said flatly. So we keep trying. Jake, this means maybe you should get tested too. His head snapped up, eyes suddenly sharp and cold. I don't need to get tested. Tyler exists. That's all the evidence anyone needs. But what if? What if what, Charlotte? His voice had taken on that edge she'd learned to fear. Not angry exactly, but something worse. Dismissive. Like she was a child suggesting something absurd. What if I'm somehow defective despite the literal living proof that I'm not? Is that what you're trying to say? Charlotte backed down. She always backed down. By year 4, Charlotte stopped trying to convince Jake to see a doctor. She stopped suggesting anything, really. She learned that her role in this marriage wasn't to have opinions or needs. It was to be perfect. To smile at Victoria's dinner parties. To laugh at Jake's business partner's jokes. To pretend she didn't notice when Amanda's name appeared on his phone screen for the 15th time in a day. The Thornfield name requires heirs, Victoria said at every family gathering, her voice sharp as cut glass. She'd look at Charlotte when she said it, her meaning crystal clear. You are failing at your most basic duty. Christmas became Charlotte's personal hell. Every year, Jake insisted on hosting the family gathering at their Beacon Hill townhouse. The one his parents had bought them as a wedding gift, never letting Charlotte forget that she lived in Thornfield property, slept in a Thornfield bed, existed in a Thornfield world. Every year, Victoria would comment on which cousins had produced children. Every year, Jake's sister would arrive with her perfect twins and her perfect husband and her perfect life that seemed designed specifically to highlight everything Charlotte didn't have. And every year, Jake would drink too much eggnog and disappear for an hour to check on something at the office, coming back smelling like perfume that wasn't Charlotte's. By year 5, Charlotte couldn't remember the last time Jake had touched her with genuine affection. Sex had become a monthly obligation, performed with mechanical efficiency. He never looked at her during. Never said her name. Just finished and rolled away, already reaching for his phone before his breathing had even steadied. What's wrong with you? Became Jake's favorite question. What's wrong with you that you can't give me children? What's wrong with you that you're so needy? What's wrong with you that you can't just be happy with what you have? Charlotte started believing him. Started thinking maybe there really was something fundamentally broken inside her. Something that made her unlovable, unfertile, uneverything. She stopped calling her friends. What would she say? That her marriage was a beautiful shell with nothing inside? That she lived in a gorgeous prison where the bars were made of family expectations and old money and the crushing weight of her own inadequacy? Her mother tried to help. Come home, Charlotte, Eleanor would say during their weekly phone calls. You don't sound like yourself anymore. But Charlotte couldn't explain that she didn't know who herself was anymore. The woman she'd been at 24, confident, educated, full of dreams, had been slowly erased, replaced by this hollow thing that existed only to fail at being a Thornfield. By year 7, Charlotte had perfected the art of disappearing. Not physically, she was always exactly where Jake needed her to be. But internally, she'd learned to go somewhere else. Somewhere safe inside her own head where Jake's words couldn't reach her. Where Victoria's cutting remarks bounced off harmlessly. Where the pitying looks from other society wives didn't make her want to sink through the floor. She decorated their house for Christmas on December 1st, exactly when Victoria expected it to be done. She ordered the correct champagne for Jake's business parties. She wore the right dresses and said the right things and smiled until her face ached. And every night, she lay in bed next to a man who felt like a stranger, wondering how she'd become so small, so invisible, so completely erased. What Charlotte didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that everything was about to get so much worse. That the marriage that had slowly hollowed her out over 7 years was about to take one final thing from her. The last thing she had left, her father's legacy. The call came on a Tuesday in September 2008. Charlotte was arranging flowers in the dining room. White roses, because Victoria was coming for dinner and white roses were the only acceptable centerpiece, when she heard Jake's voice from his study. Not his usual smooth, controlled tone. Something raw. Almost panicked. "I understand that, Dad, but we don't have that kind of liquidity. The Beacon Hill properties alone are leveraged to..." "Yes, I know what the family reputation means. You think I don't know?" Charlotte set down the roses and moved closer to the study door. "How long do we have?" Jake's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "Jesus. That's not enough time to..." "No, I can't ask Mother. You know she'll never let me hear the end of it." When Jake emerged 20 minutes later, his face was ashen. For the first time in 7 years, Charlotte saw something in his eyes that looked almost like fear. "We need to talk," he said. The housing market collapse had hit Thornfield real estate like a tsunami. Everything Jake's grandfather had built, everything his father had expanded, everything the family name represented in Boston, all of it was circling the drain. The company had been over-leveraged, too confident in the endless upward trajectory of property values. When the market crashed, they crashed with it. "We're looking at bankruptcy," Jake said, pacing the living room while Charlotte sat frozen on the sofa. "Complete liquidation. The company, the properties, everything. My father's legacy gone. 3 generations of Thornfields wiped out." Charlotte had never seen him like this. Vulnerable. Almost human. "How much do you need?" she heard herself asking. Jake stopped pacing. "What?" "To save the company." "How much?" "Charlotte, we're talking about serious money here. 50, maybe 60,000 just to keep the doors open while we restructure." "I can't ask you." "I have 50,000, Charlotte said quietly. Jake's head snapped toward her. "What?" "My father's life insurance. The money from when he died." Charlotte's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. "It's been sitting in an investment account. I was saving it for..." She stopped. She'd been saving it for their children's education. For a future that apparently wasn't coming. "Charlotte." Jake crossed the room and knelt in front of her. It was the first time he'd touched her gently in months. "I can't take your inheritance. It's not just my inheritance. It's our future." The words came out stronger than she felt. "You said it yourself, 3 generations of Thornfields. That's our children's legacy too." "That's..." She swallowed hard. "That's what my father would have wanted. To help family." Jake's hands found hers. His eyes were suddenly warm, focused on her in a way they hadn't been in years. "Are you sure? Because Charlotte, this would change everything. If we can stabilize the company, we could finally stop stressing about money. We could focus on us. On starting our family. On building the life we always talked about." Charlotte's heart squeezed. When was the last time Jake had talked about their life together like it was something he actually wanted? "This is our future, Charlotte," Jake continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Save us. Save our family. Save everything we've worked for. Your father, God, your father was a good man. He'd understand this. He'd want his money to build something lasting." Charlotte felt tears on her cheeks. "You really think this could change things? Between us?" "Baby, I know it will." Jake pulled her into his arms. "Once this pressure is off, once we're stable again, I can be the husband you deserve. We can finally have everything. The family, the life, all of it. I promise you." Something told Charlotte to be careful. To think this through. But Jake was holding her like he used to, back when they first married. Like she mattered. Like she was precious instead of defective. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's save our family." What Charlotte didn't tell Jake was that she'd turned on her phone's voice recorder when he'd started making promises. She didn't know why she did it, some instinct she didn't fully understand. But as Jake's words filled her phone's memory, "I promise you, our future. Everything we've worked for." Something deep inside Charlotte whispered that she might need proof of this moment someday. The money transfer took 3 days. Charlotte liquidated the investment account, watching her father's legacy convert into numbers on a screen. $50,000. Every penny her father had worked for, every late night at his architecture firm, every sacrifice he'd made to leave his daughter something solid. All of it flowing into Thornfield Real Estate's accounts. "I won't forget this," Jake said when the transfer completed. He kissed her forehead. "You saved us, Charlotte. You saved everything." For 6 weeks, Charlotte believed him. Jake was different at first. Attentive. Almost grateful. He came home for dinner, asked about her day, even suggested they book a weekend in Vermont to reconnect. Charlotte felt something unfurl in her chest that she'd thought was dead, hope. But as the company stabilized, as the crisis passed, Jake began to change. Or rather, he stopped pretending. The late nights returned. The phone calls with Amanda increased. She's consulting on the restructure, Jake explained when Charlotte asked. She has an MBA. She understands this stuff. By month 4, the Vermont weekend had been canceled 3 times. I have to meet with investors, Jake said. You understand. By month 8, Thornfield Real Estate was posting record profits. The restructuring had worked almost too well. Jake had found new investors, new properties, new opportunities in the chaos of the housing market. He was a genius, the business magazine said. A phoenix rising from the ashes of the crash. Charlotte watched from the sidelines as her husband became a success story. She watched him buy a new BMW. Watched him order custom suits from Italy. Watched him book a corporate box at Fenway Park for client entertainment. Jake, she said one evening as he came home wearing a watch she didn't recognize. Maybe we could talk about finally seeing that fertility specialist together? Now that things are stable. I'm exhausted, Charlotte. He didn't even look at her. Can we not do this tonight? But you promised. I promised to save the company. I did that. Or rather, we did that. His smile was sharp. Your father's money came in handy, didn't it? The casualness of it made Charlotte's stomach turn. Like her inheritance was just a convenient business transaction. Like her father's life's work was just another line item in the Thornfield real estate ledger. By month 14, Charlotte was still shopping at Target while Jake wore Armani. Still budgeting for groceries while he spent $300 on business lunches. Still sleeping alone while he had dinner meetings that ran until midnight. Where were you? She asked one night when he stumbled in at 2 a.m., smelling like wine and perfume. Working. His eyes were cold. Some of us have to actually earn the money around here. The words hit like a slap. I gave you $50,000. And I turned it into millions. Jake's laugh was ugly. So maybe show a little gratitude. Charlotte's mother saw it happening. He's using you, Eleanor said during one of their coffee dates. Her hands, trembling slightly with the early symptoms of the illness that would eventually steal her mind, gripped Charlotte's across the table. Baby, that money was yours. Your safety net. Your father wanted you to have security. I have security, Charlotte said automatically. I'm married to. You're married to a man who treats you like hired help. Eleanor's voice cracked. Please, come home. We'll figure this out together. But Charlotte couldn't. Where would she go? What would she do? She'd given Jake everything. Her inheritance, her identity, 7 years of her life. Walking away now would mean admitting it had all been for nothing. By month 18, Thornfield Real Estate was valued at $50 million. Jake made Forbes's 30 under 40 list. The business magazines wanted interviews. The socialites wanted his attention. And Charlotte wanted her husband to come home before midnight. Just once. Amanda's been invaluable, Jake announced at a family dinner, raising his wine glass. Her strategic insights during the restructuring were brilliant. I honestly don't know if we'd be here without her. Victoria nodded approvingly. Smart woman, that one. Always said Jake should have married her. Charlotte felt the words like a knife between her ribs. But she smiled. She always smiled. Later that night, as Charlotte was getting ready for bed, Jake appeared in the doorway of their bedroom. For a moment, she thought maybe he'd come to apologize. To remember the man he'd been 6 weeks after she gave him everything. You know what's funny? Jake said, leaning against the doorframe. Your father's money saved the wrong thing. Charlotte's hands stilled on her moisturizer. What? It saved the company. The Thornfield name. The legacy. His smile was cruel in the dim light. But it didn't save us, did it? Didn't make you fertile. Didn't make you interesting. Didn't make you enough. He left before Charlotte could respond. Left her standing in their bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror, wondering how she'd become so invisible. That night, Charlotte lay awake listening to Jake snore in the guest room. He'd started sleeping there months ago, claiming her tossing and turning kept him awake. She thought about her father, about the life insurance money that was supposed to be her safety net, her security, her proof that someone had loved her enough to leave her something solid. She'd given it all away, and she'd gotten nothing in return except the privilege of watching her husband become successful while treating her like she was worthless. Charlotte didn't know it yet, but it was about to get worse. So much worse. The charity gala ended early. The winter storm forecast had made everyone nervous, and by 9 o'clock, Boston's elite were calling for their cars and heading home to their warm houses and their perfect families. Charlotte stood in the coat check line at the Four Seasons, grateful for the excuse to leave. She'd been planning something special for tomorrow, Christmas Eve. Their 8th anniversary of that perfect proposal in the snow. Maybe if she made Jake's favorite meal, if she reminded him of when they'd been happy, if she tried hard enough. Charlotte stopped herself. 8 years of trying hard enough, and what did she have to show for it? But still, she'd bought organic beef for his favorite Wellington, had the ingredients for his mother's wassail recipe. Tomorrow she'd prove she could still be the wife Jake needed, the wife who deserved her place in the Thornfield family. The drive home through the snow-dusted streets should have been peaceful. Christmas lights twinkled in brownstone windows. Couples walked hand in hand through the common. Charlotte tried not to think about how long it had been since Jake had held her hand. She pulled into their driveway at 9:47 p.m. Jake's car was there, which was unusual. He'd said he'd be at the office until midnight. Amanda's Mercedes was parked behind it. Charlotte's stomach tightened. They're probably just working, she told herself. Amanda was consulting on some new property acquisition. It was fine. It was normal. Except it was almost 10 o'clock on December 23rd, and they were alone in Charlotte's house. She sat in her car for a moment, key still in the ignition, telling herself she was being paranoid. Telling herself to stop being the jealous, insecure wife Jake accused her of being. But something kept her frozen there, watching the warm light spilling from the study windows. Finally, she turned off the car, gathered her evening bag, walked up the front steps as quietly as possible in her heels. The front door was unlocked. Charlotte slipped inside, and that's when she heard it, laughter from the study. Jake's deep chuckle and Amanda's higher, sharper laugh. The sound of people who were comfortable together. Intimate. Charlotte moved toward the sound like a sleepwalker. The study door was cracked open just enough. God, she's so pathetic. Amanda's voice was filled with amused contempt. Still playing the perfect Thornfield wife like it means something. Like you actually care. It's exhausting, Jake replied. Charlotte could picture him leaning back in his leather chair, probably swirling his scotch. The way she tries so hard. Making my favorite meals, asking about my day, suggesting we reconnect. He said the word like it tasted bad. Why don't you just divorce her? I've been thinking about it. Jake's voice was casual. Easy. Like he was discussing what to order for lunch. Now that the company's stable, I don't really need her anymore. Charlotte's hand found the wall. Don't really need her anymore. Did you ever love her? Amanda asked. Even a little? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, no. Not really. The marriage was always about positioning. Her family had the right connections. She had that money from her father. And she was so desperate to be loved that I knew she'd be easy to control. Charlotte couldn't breathe. The hallway was spinning. $50,000, Jake continued, and Charlotte could hear the smile in his voice. That's what it cost to save Thornfield Real Estate. Her entire inheritance. She liquidated everything and handed it over like a good little wife. Actually believed I'd suddenly become the man of her dreams. And you just took it? Amanda sounded impressed. She practically begged me to take it. Save our family, Jake. Save our future. His impression of Charlotte was cruel, whiny, pathetic. I recorded that whole conversation. Her gushing about how this would fix everything between us. God, she's so naive. They both laughed. The sound echoed in Charlotte's chest like breaking glass. The best part. Jake's voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. She thinks the problem is her. Thinks she's defective because we can't have kids. Has no idea I've been getting tested on the side. And, Amanda prompted. And let's just say Tyler better hope he never needs a DNA test. More laughter. Cruel, casual laughter about Charlotte's pain. About her years of fertility treatments and crying in parking lots and believing she was broken. When will you tell her? Amanda asked. Christmas Eve. Tomorrow night. Jake sounded almost cheerful. Nothing says happy holidays like divorce papers, right? Besides, I've already had my lawyer draw everything up. No prenup means I keep everything, the house, the company, all of it. Her inheritance saved my ass, but legally? It was a gift. She can't touch it. What about her? Where will she go? Not my problem. Jake's voice was cold. Indifferent. She can move back in with her mother. Eleanor's got early dementia anyway. Charlotte can go play nurse. Maybe she'll finally be useful for something. Charlotte's hand was over her mouth, holding back the sound that wanted to escape. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be her husband. Her marriage. Her life. Tyler's excited to finally live here full time, Amanda said. He keeps asking when we can move in. Soon. Very soon. The kid deserves a real family. Not whatever this has been. Charlotte backed away from the door. Her heel caught on the edge of the Persian runner, and she stumbled, catching herself on the console table. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough. The conversation in the study stopped. Charlotte ran. Out the front door, down the steps, back to her car. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She started the engine and just drove, no destination, no plan. Just away. She ended up in a parking lot by the Charles River. The snow was falling harder now, coating her windshield, cocooning her in white silence. Charlotte sat there for 3 hours, staring at nothing, her mind replaying the conversation over and over. I never loved her. The money was always the goal. She practically begged me to take it. At some point, the numbness took over. That strange, protective distance that happens when pain becomes too big to feel all at once. Charlotte watched herself from somewhere far away as she drove back home. Parked in the driveway. Walked up the steps. Amanda's car was gone. The lights were off except for the one Jake always left on in the foyer. Charlotte moved through her house like a ghost. She put away her coat, changed into jeans and a sweater, went to the kitchen and began preparing Jake's favorite Christmas Eve dinner as if her hands belonged to someone else. Beef Wellington. Roasted vegetables. His mother's wassail recipe. She moved mechanically, precisely. Followed each step of each recipe. Set the table with the good china. Lit candles. Made everything perfect. Jake came down at 7 o'clock, drawn by the smell of dinner. He stopped in the doorway of the dining room, taking in the elaborate spread. What's all this? He asked. Christmas Eve dinner. Charlotte's voice sounded normal. Steady. It's tradition. They ate in near silence. Jake complimented the food. Charlotte smiled and thanked him. They could have been strangers sharing a meal at a hotel restaurant. After dinner, after Charlotte had cleared the plates and was washing dishes, Jake appeared beside her with a manila envelope. I have something for you, he said. Charlotte dried her hands. Took the envelope. Opened it. Divorce papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name and Jake's name and 8 years reduced to legal language and check boxes. I want a divorce, Jake said simply. I want to start fresh. With someone who can give me what I need. Someone who can give me children. Charlotte stared at the papers. Amanda. Yes. Amanda and I are getting married. Tyler needs a real family, and honestly, I think we've both known this wasn't working for a long time. I gave you everything, Charlotte heard herself say. My inheritance. My father's money. Everything he left me. Jake shrugged. And I'm grateful. That money saved the company. But Charlotte, that doesn't obligate me to stay in a marriage that makes me miserable. You said you loved me. You promised. I promised to save the company. I did that. His eyes were flat. Empty. The rest of it? That was just what you wanted to hear. Charlotte felt something crack inside her chest. When? When what? When did you decide? That you never loved me. That this was all? Her voice broke. When? Jake considered the question like it was mildly interesting. Probably always knew. You were convenient. Well-connected. Had that inheritance. And you were so eager to please that I knew you'd never fight back. He left her standing in the kitchen holding divorce papers while he went upstairs to pack a bag. I'm staying at the Harvard Club for a few days, he called down. We can work out the details after Christmas. Oh, and Charlotte? You should probably call your mother. You'll need somewhere to go. The door closed behind him at 9:17 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Charlotte stood in her kitchen. No, in the Thornfield kitchen, because nothing here had ever really been hers, and waited to feel something. Anything. The numbness held. 2 weeks later, Amanda and Tyler moved in. Charlotte watched from her mother's apartment as moving trucks pulled up to the house she'd decorated, the home she'd maintained, the space she'd tried so desperately to be worthy of. Victoria called once. "It's best for everyone, dear," she said in that crisp voice that allowed no argument. "You were never quite right for the family. I'm sure you understand." Charlotte packed her Honda Civic on New Year's Eve while fireworks exploded over Boston Harbor. Everything she owned fit in her car: clothes, books, a few photographs from before. Before Jake. Before she'd learned that love was just another word for transaction. She drove away from Beacon Hill, from the Thornfield name, from 8 years of slowly disappearing. Her mother waited in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and medical bills stacked on the counter. Eleanor didn't say, "I told you so." She just held Charlotte while her daughter finally broke. Charlotte was 31 years old. She had no money, no home, no husband, and no idea who she was without all of that. She had nothing left to lose. Which meant, though she didn't know it yet, she was finally free. Eleanor's apartment was in Dorchester, in a building where the elevator worked half the time, and the heat was always either too much or not enough. It had one bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a living room where the wallpaper was peeling in the corners. This was where Charlotte's mother lived on a fixed income and mounting medical bills. This was where Charlotte moved on New Year's Day, with everything she owned in the back of her Honda Civic. "You can have the bedroom," Eleanor said, but Charlotte could see how her mother's hands trembled when she tried to lift Charlotte's suitcase. The dementia was getting worse. Some days Eleanor was sharp as ever. Other days she forgot what year it was, asked about Charlotte's father like he might walk through the door any moment. "I'll take the couch," Charlotte said. "It's fine." Nothing was fine. The first month was a blur of gray. Charlotte would wake up on the lumpy sofa and stare at the water-stained ceiling, trying to remember why she should get up. Most days she couldn't think of a reason. She'd lie there for hours, listening to Eleanor move through the apartment, the shuffle of slippered feet a reminder that at least someone still needed her. Food tasted like cardboard. Sleep was impossible. She'd close her eyes and see Jake's face, hear his voice. She practically begged me to take it. When she did sleep, she'd dream about the house on Beacon Hill, about walking through rooms that got smaller and smaller until she was trapped, suffocating. The worst part was the holiday season that wouldn't end. It was January, but Boston was still decorated. Christmas lights still twinkled on the common. Store windows still had their displays. Every carol that played in elevators, every red and green decoration that hadn't been taken down yet, it all felt like the universe mocking her. Christmas Eve would always be the night her husband handed her divorce papers. The night she learned her entire marriage had been a transaction. That date was ruined forever. By February, Eleanor's medical bills were stacked 6 inches high on the kitchen counter. Charlotte opened them one afternoon while her mother napped, and felt her stomach drop. Neurologist appointments, MRI scans, medications that cost more per month than Eleanor's entire Social Security check. "We can't afford this," Charlotte whispered to the empty kitchen. She needed a job. Any job. But what could she do? She had a degree in art history from BU that she'd never used. 8 years of experience being a Thornfield wife, which qualified her for exactly nothing. The furniture store in Cambridge was hiring. Charlotte saw the sign in the window and stood outside for 20 minutes, trying to make herself go in. This was so far from where she was supposed to be. She was supposed to be hosting charity luncheons and sitting on museum boards. She was supposed to matter. Instead, she walked into Henley's Home Furnishings and asked for an application. The manager, a kind woman named Donna who looked at Charlotte's trembling hands and asked no questions, hired her on the spot. Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. $12 an hour. That work for you? Charlotte nodded because she couldn't speak without crying. The work was mind-numbing. Stand by the showroom floor. Greet customers. Show them sofas and dining tables and accent chairs. Smile. Be helpful. Don't think about how you used to buy furniture like this without checking price tags. Don't think about the custom sofa Jake picked out with Amanda that's probably sitting in your old living room right now. Charlotte was good at not thinking. She'd had years of practice. She'd been working at Henley's for 3 weeks when Marcus Sterling walked in. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair going silver at the temples and the kind of presence that made people look twice. Confident but not arrogant. He wore jeans and an expensive sweater, the kind of casual that only comes from actually having money and not needing to prove it. "Can I help you?" Charlotte asked automatically, her customer service smile fixed in place. "I hope so." His smile was genuine, reached his eyes. "I just sold my company and bought a condo in the seaport. Turns out selling a tech startup doesn't automatically give you good taste in furniture. I'm hoping you can save me from buying everything in chrome and leather." Charlotte almost said she couldn't help him. Almost passed him off to Donna or one of the other associates. But something about the self-deprecating humor, the admission of not knowing, made her pause. "What kind of space are we working with?" she heard herself ask. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her photos. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Open floor plan. Beautiful bones, but completely empty. Charlotte felt something flicker to life inside her. Something she thought Jake had killed. "You need warmth," she said, studying the photos. "The space is all glass and concrete. You need wood tones, textured fabrics. Things that make it feel like a home, not a showroom." She walked him through the store, and it was like her brain woke up for the first time in months. She saw pieces that would work together, saw how to layer textures and colors, saw the potential in empty space. "This," Marcus said when she'd finished explaining her vision, "is exactly what I needed. You have an incredible eye for design." Charlotte felt heat rise to her cheeks. When was the last time someone had complimented her? Actually seen something she was good at? "I'll take everything you suggested," Marcus said. "When can it be delivered?" 2 weeks later, Marcus was back. "I need help with the bedroom," he said, finding Charlotte reorganizing the lamp display. "And maybe the guest room. And possibly the office. Turns out you were right about everything. And now I want the whole place to feel like that." Charlotte helped him again. And then he came back the next week for accent pieces. And then the week after that for artwork recommendations. "You know," Donna said after Marcus's 4th visit, "I think that man's furniture shopping is just an excuse." Charlotte didn't let herself think about what that meant. It was March, 3 months after Charlotte had started working at Henley's, when Marcus asked her to come see the finished condo. "I want to make sure it looks right," he said. "Professional opinion." Charlotte almost said no. But Eleanor was having a good day and insisted Charlotte should go. "You need to get out of this apartment, sweetheart. You're starting to look like a ghost." The condo was beautiful. Everything Charlotte had suggested had come together perfectly. Warm, sophisticated, lived in. Marcus handed her a glass of wine, and they stood by the windows, looking out at the harbor. "Thank you," he said, "for making this feel like home. I didn't realize how much I needed that." "It's just furniture," Charlotte said. "No." Marcus turned to look at her. "It's vision. It's understanding space and how people live in it. You're talented, Charlotte. Whatever else you've done in your life, you should be doing this." Something in his voice, the sincerity, the certainty, made Charlotte's carefully constructed walls crack. And suddenly she was crying. Not delicate tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. Marcus didn't try to touch her or tell her it would be okay. He just waited. When she finally got control of herself, he handed her a box of tissues and said, "Want to talk about it?" So Charlotte told him. Everything. Jake and the inheritance and the Christmas Eve divorce and the 8 years of slowly disappearing. She told us stranger things she hadn't been able to tell anyone, and Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That man is a fool." "I'm the fool," Charlotte said. "I gave him everything. I believed." "No." Marcus's voice had an edge to it that surprised her. "He's the fool, and someday he's going to realize what he gave up. What he threw away. But Charlotte, you're not broken. You're just with someone who is too damaged to see your worth." Charlotte looked at him, this man she barely knew who was angrier on her behalf than she'd been for herself. "How did you end up selling furniture?" Marcus asked. "It was the only place that would hire me. But you could be doing this professionally. Interior design. You're wasting your talent pointing people towards sofas." Charlotte laughed, but it came out bitter. "I can't. I have no money, no portfolio, no clients. I'm living on my mother's couch and trying to figure out how to pay her medical bills. So start small. Marcus leaned forward. Design spaces for people who need help. Build a portfolio. I know at least 20 tech guys who just got acquisition money and have no idea how to make their spaces livable. I can't ask you. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering opportunity. Marcus's eyes were serious. You helped me. Let me help you. That's how this works. Charlotte wanted to say no. Wanted to protect herself from hoping, from trying, from the possibility of failing again. But Eleanor's medical bills were on the kitchen counter. And maybe, just maybe, there was something she could build from these ruins. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Marcus smiled. Good. I'll make some calls. Over the next 2 months, Marcus was true to his word. He introduced Charlotte to his friends, tech entrepreneurs, startup founders, people with money and terrible taste who needed help. She started designing their spaces on weekends, building a portfolio one room at a time. And slowly, carefully, Charlotte started to feel like maybe she wasn't completely hollow inside. Maybe there was something left of her that Jake hadn't destroyed. Something that could grow again. Marcus never asked for anything. Never pushed. Just kept showing up with opportunities and quiet faith that she could do this. Why are you helping me? Charlotte asked one day. Because you remind me of myself, Marcus said. After my divorce, I thought I'd never build anything again. But sometimes you need someone to see your potential when you can't see it yourself. He'd been there. He understood. And for the first time in months, Charlotte felt like maybe she could breathe. Maybe she could survive this. Maybe she could be more than the woman Jake had thrown away. The therapist's office was in Brookline, in a converted Victorian with creaky floors and windows that looked out on bare winter trees. Charlotte sat in the waiting room on a Tuesday morning, her hands twisted together in her lap, wondering if she could just leave. Walk out. Pretend she'd never made the appointment. Charlotte Williams? The therapist appeared in the doorway. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense energy. I'm Dr. Patricia Kim. Come on back. Marcus had suggested therapy 3 months after Charlotte started designing spaces for his friends. You're good at this, he'd said. But you apologize every time you make a suggestion. Like you expect someone to tell you you're wrong. Charlotte had denied it. But then she'd caught herself doing it. I was thinking maybe this fabric, but if you hate it, we could try this layout, unless you think it's stupid. She was still asking permission to exist. Dr. Kim didn't waste time. Tell me why you're here. So Charlotte told her. About Jake and the marriage that was really a business transaction. About the inheritance and Christmas Eve and the voice she'd heard through the study door. She practically begged me to take it. And when you heard that, Dr. Kim asked, what did you believe about yourself? That I was stupid. Worthless. That he was right. There was something wrong with me. Was there? What? Was there something wrong with you? Were you actually worthless? Or were you with someone who needed you to believe you were worthless so he could control you? Charlotte opened her mouth. Closed it. Started to cry. It took 6 months of therapy before Charlotte could say it out loud. I was abused. What Jake did was emotional abuse. Naming it changed something. Suddenly all those years made sense in a different way. The gaslighting. The isolation. The constant criticism disguised as concern. Charlotte hadn't been defective. She'd been systematically broken down by someone who benefited from her believing she was broken. You're angry, Dr. Kim observed during one session. I'm furious, Charlotte admitted. I gave him 8 years. I gave him my father's money. I gave him everything, and he, her voice cracked. He laughed about it. Good, Dr. Kim said. Anger means you're healing. Anger means you know you deserved better. The anger fueled something else, determination. Charlotte had always loved architecture. As a child, she'd drag her father through Boston's historic neighborhoods, making him stop so she could stare at brownstones and Victorian mansions. She'd studied art history at BU specifically because of the architecture courses. But then she'd married Jake, and the Thornfield wives didn't work. They hosted and volunteered and looked decorative. Now, designing spaces for Marcus's friends, Charlotte realized she'd been preparing for this her whole life. She understood how historic buildings worked, the proportions, the details, the way light moved through old windows. She knew how to honor the bones of a space while making it livable for modern life. "You should do this professionally," Marcus said after she'd finished his friend David's brownstone renovation. The before and after photos were stunning. Charlotte had transformed a dark, cramped space into something that felt both historic and fresh. "I am doing it professionally," Charlotte said. "You keep paying me. I mean really professionally. A business. You're too good to be working out of your mother's apartment." The idea terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Her own business. Her own name on something. Not Williams Thornfield. Just Williams. No, not even that. Heritage Homes, Charlotte said suddenly. That's what I'd call it. Because I work with historic properties. Because I'm building something that honors the past while creating something new. Marcus smiled. Perfect. Let me help you get started. I can invest. No. The word came out sharper than Charlotte intended. I appreciate it, Marcus. I really do. But I can't take anyone's money ever again. I need to build this myself. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Okay, but let me at least introduce you to people. That's not money, that's just friendship. Charlotte agreed to that. Word spread the way it does among Boston's elite, slowly at first, then all at once. Marcus's friends told their friends. Someone featured Charlotte's work on a design blog. A reporter from Boston Magazine called asking for an interview. "Who did your place? It's incredible," became a refrain Charlotte heard at the few social events she forced herself to attend. She handed out business cards she'd designed herself, printed at FedEx because she couldn't afford a designer yet. The work came in steadily. Not enough to quit Henley's. Not yet, but enough that Charlotte started saving. Every penny went into a separate account. Every cent she earned from design work got reinvested in her business. She bought professional photography of her projects, created a website, printed real business cards. Eleanor watched her daughter transform. "Your father would be so proud," she said one evening, and Charlotte knew her mother meant it even though she probably wouldn't remember saying it tomorrow. "I'm using his money," Charlotte said quietly. "The money Jake took. I'm building what Dad's legacy was supposed to create." "You're building more than that, sweetheart. You're building yourself." Marcus asked Charlotte out in month 7 of their friendship. They were standing in the back bay brownstone she'd just finished designing, golden hour light pouring through the tall windows. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Not as business. As not business." Charlotte's heart did something complicated. Marcus was handsome, successful, kind. He believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. But the thought of dating, of trusting someone again, of being vulnerable. "I can't," she said. "I'm not ready." "Okay." Marcus smiled, and there was no pressure in it. "But I'll ask again." He did. Every few months, casual and easy, never making her feel guilty for saying no. And every time, Charlotte said she wasn't ready. Because she wasn't. She was still learning to be herself again. Still building something that was entirely hers. By the end of year 2, Heritage Homes had 15 projects under its belt and a waiting list. Charlotte had finally quit Henley's, though she sent Donna flowers and a thank you card that made both of them cry. She was working 80-hour weeks, designing during the day and managing projects at night, but it was different from the exhaustion of trying to be enough for Jake. This exhaustion came from building something real. She hired her first employee in month 26, a recent design school graduate named Sophie who had talent and hunger and reminded Charlotte of herself before Jake. Then a project coordinator named Rachel who could manage contractors and timelines with the efficiency of a general. "You're building a real company," Marcus said, standing in the corner office Charlotte had just rented in the South End. It was small, just 2 rooms, but it was hers. She'd signed the lease with her own name, her own credit, her own money. "I'm building something that matters," Charlotte corrected. She looked out the window at the historic buildings lining the street. "I'm showing people that you can honor what came before while creating something new. That old things aren't disposable just because they're old." Marcus understood what she wasn't saying. That she was talking about herself too. That she was proving Jake wrong with every project, every client, every space she transformed. By year 3, Heritage Homes had a reputation. Boston's elite, the old money families, the ones who lived in Lewisburg Square and Beacon Hill and the historic parts of Cambridge. They called Charlotte when they wanted to renovate. They trusted her to understand their homes, to respect the history, while making spaces that worked for modern life. Charlotte hired 3 more employees, bought professional photography equipment, started a blog that went viral when Architectural Digest picked up one of her projects. She was invited to speak on a panel about historic preservation. Someone asked if she'd consider writing a book. The business was everything she'd dreamed. But more than that, she was becoming someone she actually liked. Someone with opinions she didn't apologize for. Someone who could walk into a room and know she belonged there. Marcus asked her to dinner in December of year 3. They were at a client's holiday party, and Charlotte had just landed a major project, a historic estate in Brookline that would be her biggest yet. Now, Marcus asked, after 3 years of asking, would you consider having dinner with me now? Charlotte looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd seen her at her lowest and never made her feel small, who'd believed in her business before it existed, who'd asked for nothing except the chance to be near her. Yes, she said. I think I'm finally ready. Marcus's smile could have lit the entire city. That night, walking through the common where Christmas lights sparkled in the trees, Marcus took her hand. It was the first time Charlotte had let anyone touch her with affection since Jake. The first time she'd felt ready. I've loved you for 3 years, Marcus said. But I would have waited 3 more if that's what you needed. Charlotte squeezed his hand. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me. It was nothing like what she'd had with Jake. This was built on respect and patience and genuine partnership. Marcus celebrated her successes without feeling threatened. He listened to her ideas without dismissing them. He loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. 6 months later, standing in her office with her team around her and a project schedule that stretched into next year, Charlotte realized something profound. She was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. She'd taken the ruins of her life and built something beautiful. She'd proven that the woman Jake threw away was worth more than he could ever comprehend. Heritage Homes was thriving. Charlotte was thriving. And the best part? She'd done it entirely on her own terms. Jake had taken her father's money, but she'd built her father's real legacy. Something lasting, something meaningful, something that helped people see beauty in what others might discard. She wasn't the broken woman who left Beacon Hill anymore. She was Charlotte Williams, founder of Heritage Homes, and she was just getting started. Year 4 brought recognition Charlotte had never imagined possible. Boston Magazine's October issue featured Heritage Homes in a 6-page spread titled Designer to Watch. How Charlotte Williams is revolutionizing historic renovation. The photos were stunning, before and afters of brownstones and Victorian mansions that Charlotte had transformed from tired to timeless. The morning the issue hit newsstands, Charlotte's phone exploded. Clients from Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Cambridge. Families who'd lived in their historic homes for generations and wanted someone who understood the responsibility of that legacy. People who'd seen what Charlotte could do and trusted her with their most precious spaces. Sophie ran into Charlotte's office holding the magazine, practically vibrating with excitement. Boss, we're booked solid for the next 18 months. We need to hire more people. Charlotte looked at the spread again, at her own face smiling confidently from the page. 5 years ago, she'd been crying in parking lots after fertility appointments, believing she was defective. Now she was building something that mattered. Hire 2 more designers, Charlotte said. And we need another project coordinator. We're going to do this right. That evening, Marcus took her to dinner at Ostra to celebrate. He raised his champagne glass, his eyes warm. To the woman who was always brilliant. The world's just finally catching up. Marcus, Charlotte said, setting down her menu. Her heart was pounding. Ask me again. Ask you what? What you've been asking me for 3 years. Marcus went very still. Then slowly, carefully, he smiled. Charlotte Williams, would you have dinner with me? Not as colleagues. Not as friends. As someone I'd very much like to kiss at the end of the evening. Yes, Charlotte said. God, yes. I think I'm finally ready to love you back. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I've loved you since the day you told me Eames chairs were overrated and proceeded to explain why with such passion that I knew I was in trouble. Charlotte laughed, and it felt like something unlocking in her chest. Something that had been closed for so long she'd forgotten it could open. They dated for 6 months before Marcus proposed, and it was nothing like Charlotte's first relationship. There were no games, no manipulation, no wondering if he really meant what he said. Marcus was steady as a heartbeat. He showed up when he said he would. He celebrated her wins without feeling diminished. He listened when she talked about work without offering unwanted advice or making it about him. When Charlotte had a panic attack in month 3, triggered by a client's husband who reminded her too much of Jake, Marcus held her through it without asking for explanations. Later, when she could talk, she told him about the marriage, about the therapy, about how sometimes the past still grabbed her by the throat. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said simply. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He proposed on Christmas Eve. Charlotte had told him about that date, about what it meant, about how she couldn't hear Christmas carols without feeling sick. So when Marcus asked her to meet him at the Frog Pond on Boston Common on December 24th, she almost said no. "Trust me," he'd said. "Please." The pond was lit with thousands of lights, skaters circling to music that wasn't Christmas carols, but something softer, jazzier. Snow was falling gently, and Marcus stood by the railing in a navy coat, holding a small box. "I know this date means something terrible to you," Marcus said as Charlotte approached. "I know Jake ruined Christmas. But Charlotte, you've spent 5 years taking back everything he tried to destroy. Your confidence, your career, your identity. Let's take back Christmas too." He opened the box. The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious Thornfield diamond Jake had given her. "Marry me," Marcus said. "Make Christmas beautiful again. Make it ours. Make it about the beginning of something good instead of the end of something terrible." Charlotte was crying, but they were good tears. Healing tears. Yes. God, yes. They married at City Hall in January with 6 people present. Marcus's parents, Sophie and Rachel from Heritage Homes, and Eleanor, who had a moment of perfect clarity and told Charlotte she looked exactly like her father, full of quiet determination and love. It would be one of Eleanor's last good days. By spring, the dementia had progressed too far for Charlotte to manage at home. The memory care facility in Newton was expensive, but Charlotte paid for it without hesitation. Her mother had caught her when she fell. Now Charlotte could do the same. "Keep your business separate," Marcus insisted when they married. "I want you to always know that what you built is yours, that you never have to depend on anyone." Charlotte loved him for understanding why that mattered. Heritage Homes exploded in year 5. Charlotte's before and after posts on Instagram went viral. There was something about watching historic spaces transform that captured people's imagination. The algorithm loved it. Soon Charlotte had clients from Newport, Manhattan, Charleston. People were flying her in to consult on historic properties across the East Coast. She hired more staff, moved to a bigger office, started turning down projects because they didn't align with her vision. She could afford to be selective now. She could build exactly the company she wanted. It was in month 8 of her marriage, in the middle of a site visit to a Beacon Hill townhouse, that Charlotte felt it. A wave of dizziness, so strong she had to sit down on a dusty drop cloth. "Boss, you okay?" Sophie asked, concerned. "Fine. I think I need to eat something." But the dizziness kept happening, and the nausea, and the exhaustion that made her want to sleep for days. Charlotte bought a pregnancy test on her way home, telling herself not to hope. Telling herself it was probably nothing. Telling herself she'd been through this before, and it had broken her. The test was positive. Charlotte stared at the 2 lines, her hands shaking. She took another test. And another. All positive. When she told Marcus that evening, he cried. "Are you sure? Is this real? I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. But Marcus, I need you to understand. After Jake, after everything, I'm terrified this won't work. That something will go wrong. That I'll lose this too. Then we'll be terrified together," Marcus said, pulling her close. "And whatever happens, we'll handle it together." The ultrasound at 8 weeks showed 3 heartbeats. "Triplets," the doctor said, smiling at the screen. "Congratulations. You're having triplets." Charlotte couldn't breathe. Couldn't process. After 7 years of Jake blaming her, after countless appointments and tests and tears, her body had created 3 lives. Not just one miracle, but 3. "Jake was the problem," she whispered. "It was always him." "No," Marcus said firmly, holding her hand while they stared at the 3 flickering heartbeats on the screen. There was never a problem. You were always perfect. He was just too broken to see it. The pregnancy was hard. Carrying 3 babies put strain on Charlotte's body she hadn't anticipated. But Marcus was there for every appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of fear. And in month 7, when Charlotte went into early labor, he held her hand through the emergency C-section and cried when the doctors placed 3 tiny, perfect babies on her chest. Harper, Hayes, and Hudson. 2 girls and a boy. Healthy and strong and absolutely perfect. Charlotte looked at their faces and felt something she'd thought was dead forever. Complete, overwhelming joy. "Look what we made," Marcus whispered, kissing her forehead as the nurses cleaned up the babies. "Look what you made." "We," Charlotte corrected. "Look what we made together." The next 2 years were a blur of sleepless nights and first smiles and tiny hands grabbing everything. Charlotte took maternity leave, but kept the business running with Sophie managing day-to-day operations. Heritage Homes didn't just survive her absence, it thrived. By the time the triplets were 2, the company had 20 employees and was pulling in $5 million annually. Charlotte and Marcus bought a brownstone in Back Bay, one of those historic properties Charlotte had always loved. She designed every inch of it herself, creating a home that honored the building's history while being perfectly suited for their chaotic, beautiful family. Eleanor passed away when the triplets were 18 months old. Charlotte was with her at the end, holding her mother's hand while Eleanor slipped away peacefully. At the funeral, Charlotte told the small gathering that her mother had saved her life by giving her a safe place to fall apart and rebuild. "She believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," Charlotte said. "And because of that, I got to become who I was always meant to be." Sometimes, not often, but sometimes, Charlotte would check Jake's social media. He'd married Amanda 2 years after the divorce. Their Christmas card photos showed them with Tyler and Madison, looking like a perfect family. Jake posted about his success, his properties, his achievements. Charlotte felt nothing when she saw those posts. Not anger. Not pain. Not even satisfaction. Just nothing. Jake was irrelevant to her joy now. She had Marcus, who loved her without conditions. She had Harper, Hayes, and Hudson, who proved every day that she'd never been the problem. She had Heritage Homes, which gave her purpose and pride and financial security she'd built with her own hands. She had reclaimed Christmas. The triplets' second Christmas, Charlotte decorated the brownstone with abandon, lights and garlands, and a tree so big it barely fit in the living room. Marcus had built a fire, and the children were playing with wrapping paper more than actual presents, and Charlotte felt peace. "You okay?" Marcus asked, finding her watching their family. "I'm perfect," Charlotte said. And she meant it. 5 years ago, she'd left Beacon Hill with nothing. Now she had everything. Not because someone gave it to her. Because she'd built it herself, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. Jake had tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd freed her to become someone infinitely more powerful than the woman he'd married. And that, Charlotte thought as Hudson toddled over demanding to be picked up, was the sweetest victory of all. The invitation arrived on a Sunday in early December, 5 years after Charlotte had driven away from Beacon Hill with everything she owned stuffed in her Honda Civic. Rachel brought it into Charlotte's office that Monday morning, holding the cream-colored envelope like it might explode. "This came to the business address," she said carefully. "It's addressed to you personally." Charlotte took it, recognizing the paper quality immediately. Crane and Company stationery, the kind Victoria Thornfield insisted was the only acceptable choice for important correspondence. Her hands didn't shake as she opened it. That was progress. "Jake and Amanda Thornfield request the pleasure of your company at their annual Christmas gala, Saturday, December 23rd, 7 o'clock in the evening, Thornfield Estate, Berkshires." Tucked inside was a handwritten note on matching stationery. Charlotte recognized Jake's handwriting. She'd seen it on divorce papers, after all. "Charlotte, would love for you to see how well everything turned out. Your contribution to the Thornfield legacy deserves recognition. It would mean a lot to have you there. Jake." Charlotte stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Your contribution to the Thornfield legacy deserves recognition. December 23rd. The anniversary of the night she'd overheard Jake and Amanda laughing about how pathetic she was. The night before he'd handed her divorce papers as a Christmas gift. He knew what that date meant. Of course he knew. "Boss." Rachel's voice was cautious. "You okay?" Charlotte looked up. "I'm fine. Thank you, Rachel." She wasn't fine. She was furious in a way she hadn't been in years. The calculated cruelty of it, inviting her to watch him celebrate the life he'd built with her father's money. The casual dismissal of your contribution, like she'd been a minor investor rather than the woman whose inheritance had saved everything. Charlotte's first instinct was to throw the invitation away. Burn it. Pretend it had never arrived. She'd worked so hard to build a life where Jake was irrelevant. Why would she walk back into his world now? But something stopped her from tossing it in the trash. Something that felt like unfinished business. That evening, Charlotte showed Marcus the invitation. They were in the Brownstones' kitchen, the triplets already in bed, and Charlotte had poured them both wine before handing him the cream-colored card. Marcus read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened. December 23rd. "I know. He's inviting you to watch him celebrate the empire he built with your money." Marcus's voice was carefully controlled, while simultaneously reminding you of the worst night of your life. "Your contribution deserves recognition," Charlotte quoted bitterly. "Like I was a business associate who gave him a loan. Like I wasn't his wife. What do you want to do?" Charlotte had been asking herself that question all day. Part of me wants to ignore it. We have a good life. Why go back there? And the other part? The other part wants to show him. Charlotte met Marcus's eyes. Show him what he threw away. Show him that the woman he called pathetic is doing better than he could ever imagine. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "Let me show you something." He opened Instagram, navigated to Jake's profile. Charlotte had blocked Jake years ago, hadn't looked at his social media since the divorce was finalized. But Marcus had apparently been keeping tabs. Jake's feed was exactly what Charlotte expected. Professional photos of Thornfield real estate properties. Family shots with Amanda and the kids that looked staged for maximum likes. Posts about charitable donations and business acquisitions, and the Thornfield legacy. "Look at this one," Marcus said, showing Charlotte a post from Thanksgiving. Jake, Amanda, Tyler, and Madison around a perfectly set table. The caption read, "Grateful for the family I always deserved. Building the life we always dreamed of. Hashtag Thornfield legacy, hashtag blessed, hashtag family first." "He's rewriting history," Charlotte said quietly. "Making it seem like we never happened. Like I was just an inconvenient first draft." Marcus scrolled further. There, their annual Christmas card photo. Jake and Amanda in formal wear, Tyler and Madison in coordinated outfits. Everyone smiling like a Ralph Lauren advertisement. The card had a printed message. "The Thornfield family wishes you joy and prosperity. Here's to another year of growth and success." "The company's valued at over $50 million now," Marcus said, pulling up a recent business article. "Your $50,000 became his empire. And he's acting like he did it all himself." Charlotte felt something cold settle in her chest. Not quite anger. Not quite pain. Something sharper. "I want to go." "To the party?" "Yes." Charlotte stood, pacing the kitchen. "He thinks I'm still that broken woman who left with nothing. He thinks he can invite me to gloat, to show me how much better his life is without me. He has no idea who I am now." Marcus watched her carefully. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Charlotte turned to face him. 5 years ago, he told me I'd never have children. That I was defective. That your contribution to the Thornfield legacy." Her voice cracked. "I want him to see Harper, Hayes, and Hudson. I want him to see what I built. I want to close this chapter properly. Then we go." Marcus stood. "All of us. And we show him exactly what he lost." Over the next 2 weeks, Charlotte and Marcus planned carefully. This wasn't about revenge. Charlotte had learned in therapy that revenge kept you tied to the past. This was about justice. About speaking truth. About taking back the narrative Jake had tried to write about her. "We need evidence," Marcus said one evening after the triplets were asleep. "If you're going to confront him, you need proof." Charlotte had thought of that. She still had the recording from the night she'd given Jake her inheritance. His promises about their future, about how her father's money would change everything. She had her medical records from the fertility clinic, proof that she'd been perfectly healthy the entire time. She had the financial documents showing the $50,000 transfer with no agreement, no contract, no protection. "There's more we need," Charlotte said quietly. "I need to know the truth about Jake. About whether Tyler and Madison are really his." Marcus made some calls. Turned out when you had money and connections, DNA testing wasn't as difficult as Charlotte had thought. They couldn't test Jake directly, not without his cooperation, but Marcus knew a doctor who explained genetic markers, family histories, possibilities. "There's a strong likelihood," the doctor said carefully, "that based on his genetic profile from the medical records you obtained through legal channels during the divorce proceedings, Jake cannot father children. The condition is genetic, rare, but definitive." Charlotte had suspected. Now she knew. She booked a suite at the Four Seasons Boston for December 23rd. Ordered a custom emerald green velvet gown from a designer she'd worked with on a client project. Elegant, expensive, nothing like the clothes she'd worn as Jake's wife. She found matching Christmas outfits for the triplets, red velvet and tartan that made them look like they'd stepped out of a holiday catalog. And then, in a moment of perfect symbolism, Charlotte ordered a white limousine. Not black, not silver. White, the color of brides, of new beginnings, of purity. She was reclaiming everything Jake had tried to taint. "This feels big," Marcus said the night before they were supposed to leave for the Berkshires. "Are you ready?" Charlotte thought about the woman she'd been 8 years ago, so eager to please, so desperate to be enough, so convinced that her worth came from being chosen by a thornfield. Then she thought about the woman she was now, successful, confident, whole. A woman who'd built an empire from ruins. A woman who'd proven that she was never the problem. "I'm ready," Charlotte said. "He invited me to see how well everything turned out. So let's show him." She pulled out her phone, looked at Heritage Homes' Instagram. 200,000 followers now, comments full of people praising her work, admiring her vision. She looked at the photos of her triplets, her brownstone, her life. Then she looked at the recording app where she'd saved Jake's promises from 7 years ago. "This is our future, Charlotte. Your father would want this. Save us, save our family." Such pretty lies. Such confident manipulation. Tomorrow, Jake Thornfield was going to learn what happened when you underestimated a woman you'd broken. He was going to learn that some people don't stay broken. Some people rebuild themselves into something stronger, something he could never have imagined. Charlotte Williams was going back to the Berkshires. But she wasn't going as Jake's discarded ex-wife. She was going as the woman who'd survived him. And that made all the difference. Charlotte stood in front of the mirror at the Four Seasons, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The emerald green velvet gown fit perfectly, elegant, expensive, powerful. Her hair was swept up in a way that showed off her collarbones, her shoulders, her confidence. Diamond earrings, her own, bought with her own money, caught the light. "Mama, you look like a princess," Harper said, tugging on Charlotte's gown. The 4-year-old was adorable in red velvet, her brothers matching in tartan vests and bow ties. "You look like you're about to win a war," Marcus said from the doorway. He looked devastating in his bespoke tuxedo, but his eyes were serious. "Last chance to change your mind." Charlotte took a deep breath. "I'm not changing my mind." The white limousine arrived at 7:30. As they drove through the Berkshires toward the Thornfield estate, Charlotte watched the familiar landscape pass by. Hills covered in snow, estates lit up for Christmas, the world she'd once thought she belonged to. "You okay?" Marcus asked, holding her hand. "I will be," Charlotte said. The Thornfield estate looked like something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of white lights wound through bare trees. Ice sculptures lined the circular driveway. Through the tall windows, Charlotte could see people in formal wear, champagne glasses glinting, the warm glow of wealth and success. This had been her home once. The place where Jake had proposed. The place where she'd slowly disappeared. Now she was returning on her own terms. The valet's eyes widened when their white limousine pulled up behind a parade of black cars. Marcus got out first, then helped Charlotte. The triplets followed, holding hands, looking around with wide-eyed wonder at all the pretty lights. Charlotte took a breath, adjusted her gown, and walked through the front door she'd left 8 years ago. The entrance hall fell silent. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Charlotte felt every eye in the room land on her, watched recognition dawn on familiar faces. Boston's elite, the same people who'd pitted her at charity galas, who'd whispered about her inability to give Jake children, who'd watched her marriage crumble. They were all staring. "Is that?" someone whispered. "I thought she couldn't have children. Are those triplets?" Charlotte walked forward with Marcus at her side and her children close, her head high, her smile serene. She looked like money, like success, like a woman who'd won every battle that mattered. Jake spotted her from across the room. Charlotte watched his champagne glass stop halfway to his mouth, watched his face go slack with shock. He'd been laughing with a group of business associates, probably telling some story about his brilliance, his success. Now he was staring at her like she was a ghost. Charlotte walked straight toward him. The crowd parted instinctively. She could feel the energy in the room shift. Everyone knew something was about to happen. "Charlotte." Jake's voice was disbelieving. His eyes swept over her designer gown, her confidence, the handsome man beside her, the 3 beautiful children. "What are you? How did you?" "Hello, Jake." Charlotte's voice was steady, warm even. "Thank you so much for the invitation. I wouldn't have missed this for the world." Jake was staring at the triplets like they were impossible. "You have children?" "I do. Harper, Hayes, and Hudson. They're 4. Charlotte smiled sweetly. "Turns out I was never the problem after all." Marcus extended his hand. "Marcus Sterling, Charlotte's husband. Pleasure to meet you." Jake shook automatically, clearly trying to process what he was seeing. Charlotte could practically see him doing the math. She'd gotten pregnant, had triplets, rebuilt her entire life, all while he'd been. "These are your children?" Jake repeated, like saying it again might make them disappear. "All 3 of them," Charlotte confirmed. "Conceived on the first try, actually. Amazing what happens when you're with someone who actually loves you." The comment landed like a slap. Jake flinched. Amanda materialized at Jake's side, stunning in a white gown that was probably meant to evoke wedding imagery. "Look at me, I'm the real wife." Her smile was sharp, territorial. "Charlotte, this is unexpected." "Amanda, you look beautiful." Charlotte's tone was genuine. "Thank you both for having us. I thought it would be lovely to celebrate your success. After all, as Jake's note said, my contribution to the Thornfield legacy deserves recognition." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her smile in place. "Of course. Any friend of Jake's is welcome." "Friend." The word was deliberate, dismissive. "You're nothing. You were replaced." Charlotte smiled wider. "How kind." The evening progressed with the surreal quality of a fever dream. Charlotte and Marcus mingled with Boston's elite, many of whom remembered Charlotte from her marriage. The questions were pointed but polite. "What have you been doing? Are you still in Boston? Your children are beautiful." Charlotte answered with strategic vagueness. "I've been working in design." "Yes, still in the city." "Thank you, they're my greatest joy." She could feel Jake watching her from across the room. Could see him trying to figure out how the broken woman he'd discarded had become this poised, confident stranger. How she'd had children when he'd spent 7 years blaming her for being barren. The triplets were perfect, well-behaved, adorable, obviously loved. Guests kept stopping to admire them, and Charlotte watched Jake's face each time. Watched him see what he'd insisted she could never have. Dinner was announced at 8:30. Charlotte and Marcus were seated at a table toward the back. She'd expected that. But it gave her the perfect vantage point to watch Jake and Amanda at their head table, surrounded by family and VIPs. During the salad course, Jake stood to make a toast. He looked confident again, back in his element. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Amanda and I are so grateful to celebrate this season with the people who matter most. Building Thornfield Real Estate into what it is today, it's been a journey. But I've learned that success means nothing without the right person beside you. Someone who believes in your vision. Someone who helps you become the man you're meant to be." His eyes flickered toward Charlotte for just a moment. The message was clear, and you weren't that person. Polite applause rippled through the room. Then Amanda stood, champagne glass in hand, and Charlotte felt the atmosphere shift. "I want to add something," Amanda said, her voice honey-sweet. She looked radiant, triumphant. Jake's being modest, as always. "But I think it's important to acknowledge that some relationships are meant to teach us lessons. Some people are meant to be together, and some aren't. Charlotte felt Marcus tense beside her. Jake was married before, Amanda continued, her eyes scanning the room before landing deliberately on Charlotte. 7 years. And in all that time, 7 long years, no children. No legacy. No proof that the relationship was meant to last. The room had gone deathly quiet. Guests were shifting uncomfortably, unsure where this was going. Some women just can't give men what they need, Amanda said, her smile sharp as glass. They try, but trying isn't the same as succeeding. Is it? Charlotte sat perfectly still, her face calm. But I gave Jake his son. And now Madison. Our family is complete. Amanda raised her glass higher. So here's to knowing when something isn't working and having the courage to find what does. Here's to real family. Real love. Real legacy. The applause was scattered, uncertain. People knew they'd just witnessed something cruel dressed up as celebration. Charlotte met Amanda's eyes across the room and smiled. A small, knowing smile that said, I've been waiting for this moment. Mama, Hudson whispered, tugging her sleeve. Why is that lady being mean? Because, sweetheart, Charlotte said quietly. Sometimes people who aren't happy with themselves try to make other people feel small. But we don't let them. Do we? No, all 3 triplets chorused. Marcus leaned close. Are you ready? Charlotte looked at her husband, at her children, at the room full of Boston's elite who'd just watched Amanda publicly call her barren. She thought about the evidence in her evening bag, about the truth she was about to unleash, about the woman she'd become. I'm ready, Charlotte said, standing. Her emerald gown caught the candlelight as she walked toward the microphone, every eye in the room following her. Jake's face had gone white. He knew something was coming. He just had no idea how bad it was about to get. Charlotte reached the microphone and smiled graciously at the room. At Jake. At Amanda. Thank you for that lovely toast, Amanda, she said sweetly. Now, if you'll all indulge me, I'd like to share some truths of my own. Charlotte stood at the microphone, the emerald green velvet of her gown catching the light from 1,000 candles. 200 of Boston's elite stared at her, waiting. She could feel Jake's panic from across the room, could see Amanda's confident smile starting to falter. Thank you for inviting me, Jake and Amanda, Charlotte began, her voice steady and clear. It's not often you get the opportunity to witness someone's happiness up close. And before we continue celebrating, I'd like to share some truths with everyone here tonight. She pulled out her phone, connected it to the estate's sound system, the same system she'd helped install 8 years ago for Thornfield parties. Her hands were perfectly steady as she pressed play. Jake's voice filled the ballroom, unmistakable and damning. This is our future, Charlotte. Your father would want this. Save us, save our family. Once we stabilize the company, we can finally focus on what matters. On starting our family. On building the life we always talked about. I promise you, we'll finally have everything. Children, legacy forever. The room erupted in gasps. Charlotte watched Jake's face drain of all color. That recording, Charlotte said calmly, is from the night I gave Jake $50,000. My entire inheritance from my father. Every penny he left me for security, for my future, for the children he hoped I'd have someday. She gestured to Rachel, who'd been waiting by the projection screen. Financial documents appeared, crisp, clear, undeniable. As you can see, I transferred $50,000 to Thornfield Real Estate on September 28, 2008. There was no loan agreement, no partnership contract, no repayment terms. Just a wife trying to save her husband's family legacy. Charlotte's voice remained even, professional. That company is now valued at over $50 million. My father's money was the seed that grew Jake's empire. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were leaning forward, phones out, recording. This was better than any Boston society scandal in years. But that's not the most interesting part, Charlotte continued. You see, Amanda was kind enough to mention that I couldn't give Jake children. 7 years of marriage, no children, no legacy. She called me inadequate, suggested there was something wrong with me. Rachel switched the slide. Medical documents appeared on screen. These are my fertility records from the 7 years I was married to Jake. As you can see, I underwent extensive testing. Blood work, ultrasounds, hormone panels, procedures most of you couldn't pronounce. And the results? Charlotte paused for effect. Perfect. Textbook fertile. Completely, utterly healthy. Jake had stood up, was trying to move toward the exit. Several guests had instinctively moved to block him, sensing this was about to get worse. Jake refused to be tested, Charlotte continued. For 7 years he blamed me. Told me I was defective. Made me believe I was the problem. But I did something recently. I obtained Jake's medical records through legal channels during our divorce proceedings. The next slide appeared. Medical terminology, genetic markers, a diagnosis in bold letters. Jake has a genetic condition called azoospermia. It means he cannot produce viable sperm. He cannot father children. He never could. Charlotte let that sink in. Which leads to a rather important question, doesn't it? Amanda had gone pale. She was gripping the edge of the table, her champagne glass forgotten. Tyler, Charlotte said gently, is 11 years old. Madison is 4. Beautiful children. But they're not Jake's biological children. They never were. The room exploded. People were talking over each other, turning to stare at Jake and Amanda, phones out everywhere. Amanda's face had crumpled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up cheeks. Jake was shaking his head, trying to speak, but no sound came out. Charlotte raised her voice slightly to be heard over the chaos. DNA testing confirmed what Jake's medical records already told us. Tyler is not his son. Madison is not his daughter. But Jake built his entire identity around being a father, around being able to give a woman children. The one thing he blamed me for not providing. She turned to look directly at Jake. You blamed me for 7 years for something you knew was your failure. You took my inheritance, my dignity, my father's legacy, and you used it to build an empire while telling me I wasn't enough. You invited me here tonight to humiliate me in front of Boston society, to show everyone how much better your life is without me. Charlotte's voice was steel now, righteous and clear. But what you didn't know is that I left you and met a real man. Marcus Sterling saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. He waited years for me to heal. He married me, and we conceived these 3 beautiful children immediately. On the first try. Living proof that I was never, ever the problem. The triplets were watching their mother with wide eyes, not understanding everything, but sensing the importance of this moment. I took nothing from this marriage except pain, Charlotte continued. But I built something from that pain. Heritage Homes, a $5 million interior design firm. 20 employees. Clients across the East Coast. Built from nothing, with my own talent, my own vision, my own work. While you were building your empire on my father's money and my broken heart, I was building something real. She took a breath, her voice softening slightly. You thought you were inviting a victim here tonight, Jake. You thought you'd parade your success in front of the poor, barren ex-wife who wasn't good enough for the Thornfield name. But you didn't invite a victim. You invited the woman who survived you, who thrived despite you, who became everything you tried to convince me I could never be. Charlotte turned to Amanda, and her expression held something almost like compassion. Amanda, I'm sorry you're finding out this way. You deserve the truth about whose children you're raising. You deserve to know that the man you married built his identity on a lie. She disconnected her phone from the sound system, gathered her evening bag, and walked back to where Marcus and the triplets waited. Marcus stood, offered her his arm, and together they moved toward the exit. Behind them, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Amanda was crying openly now, shouting at Jake. Guests were talking over each other, recording, calling friends. Jake was trying to explain, to defend himself, but his voice was drowned out by 200 people who'd just watched his entire life explode. Charlotte walked through it all with her head high, her children close, her husband at her side. She didn't look back. Not once. The white limousine was waiting exactly where they'd left it. Charlotte helped the triplets inside, settled into the leather seats, and finally, let out the breath she'd been holding. That was amazing, Marcus said, pulling her close. I have never been more proud to be your husband. Mama, everyone was talking so loud, Hayes said, concerned. I know, baby. But we're done now. We can go home. Was that the fancy party? Harper asked. That, Charlotte said, was closure. As the limousine pulled away from the Thornfield estate, Charlotte looked back one last time through the rear window. She could see people spilling out onto the driveway, chaos visible even from a distance. Somewhere in there, Jake was trying to salvage something from the ruins of his lies. Amanda was realizing her perfect family had been built on fiction. But Charlotte felt only peace. Not satisfaction exactly. Not revenge. Just the quiet certainty that she'd told the truth, that justice had been served, that the chapter was finally completely closed. "Where to?" the driver asked. Marcus looked at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at her children. "Home," she said. "Take us home." The limousine carried them away from the Berkshires, away from the Thornfield name, away from the past. Charlotte settled back into the seat, Marcus's arm around her, her children chattering about the pretty lights and the fancy dresses. She'd walked into Jake's world as a victor, not a victim. She'd spoken her truth before the people who'd watched her marriage crumble. She'd reclaimed her narrative, her dignity, her worth. And now she was going home to the life she'd built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. The woman Jake had thrown away had become someone he could never have imagined. And that was the sweetest victory of all.